This conference will now be recorded.
All right,
And Mr. Ballantyne, Mr. Powers is not having any opening remarks, so the floor is yours, sir.
Good evening. I'd like to call together the Harwich Board of Selectmen meeting for March 23rd, 2006. And before we go farther, I'd ask Dana to call to order the Finance Committee.
This is Dana DeCosta. I will call to order the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Dana. Next, we'll turn it over to Joe Powers to start us on this adventure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just remind if both chairs could just do roll call to call their boards to order, just so we do have that statement, because we have some folks that are on unidentified calls. So I'd ask Mr. Chairman for the Board of Selectmen for you to start, and then Mr. DeCosta to do the same for his board. And I don't know if we have a quorum yet of the school committee, but they should go through the same exercise as well.
I will start then with a roll call. Ed?
Here.
Don?
Here, and it's not 2006, Mr. Chair.
Is that what I said? Sorry. Michael?
Here.
Steve?
Here.
And I'm here as well. Dana, I'll turn it to you.
Sure. John, you're here?
Yeah.
Tom?
Yes, I'm here. Jonathan, here.
Brian's here. Dan's here. Do we have anybody else in this?
Dale.
Dale's here, yeah. We have Mark Amraz. We do have a quorum, but that's, I don't see any others.
Thank you, Dana. Mr. Carpenter, Scott, do you wish to call your roll call and open your meeting?
Sure. I'm here. Katie Acerneo's here. Tina Gaines is here. Terry Russell's here by phone, and Meredith Henderson.
Thank you, Scott. Joe, thanks for that. We'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it appears that there is a full membership, so full quorum of the Board of Selectmen. There is a majority quorum of the Finance Committee. The Regional School Committee does not yet have a quorum. If they gain all the members and they want to deliberate, we should have them identified as being in their joint session. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the agenda, you can see that it's a reference to coronavirus COVID-19 update. I have three very specific updates that I'll get into under this section, and obviously under Town Administrator's report or any other agenda item that will probably relate back to coronavirus, I can go into more detail. First and foremost, I want to draw everyone's attention to the Town of Harwich website. Staff, Jamie Goodwin was instrumental in establishing a coronavirus COVID-19 resource page. And when you go on harwich-ma.gov, you'll see that that is above the photograph of the sailboats and right below the banner. If you click on that, you'll find just about every document and every resource that the town has either utilized or created in one source on that page. That's obviously going to be very helpful for people to
bring themselves up to speed and remain informed. In addition to that resource page, we were made aware today through Governor Baker's announcement and issuance of COVID-19 order number 13. As we all know, this was the order that, quoted from the headline, assuring continued operation of essential services in the Commonwealth, closing certain workplaces and prohibiting gatherings of more than 10 people. I've had an update with our department heads. We talked about that to some degree. Our health director, Megan Eldridge, and I are working on establishing a guidance document. We expect that to be guidance document number 9. sort of summarizing and indicating what Governor Baker's Order Number 13 will mean for the town of Harwich specifically. And then, Mr. Chairman, if you want me to yield at that point, I can. I would say at this point, the sewer updates are somewhat in flux. There's some decision-making, obviously, with the previous issue of traffic control, but also generally speaking, I know one of the contractors is at the point where staff is going to be in a position to have to evaluate if that contractor can proceed to part of their next portion of the plan, given that it requires them to access homes and impact upon homes where the original plan assumed that the vast majority of those homes would have been vacant during the time of day that was done. So if I may, I'd like to stand down on my COVID-19 update and defer on the two construction updates at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Can't hear anything. Nothing. Zero. And that backup PC, is there an audio thing we need to adjust? I'm getting a level, but
of the education going. I want to emphasize it's not going to be perfect. I've been sharing with our parents that yeah, it's going to be a messy process as we dive into distance learning, but but I've been very clear with our families and our staff that given everything we see out there in the news, this isn't a short-term thing, and we need to be prepared to go the long haul if need be. So all of our middle schoolers were issued their Chromebooks that they use in the classrooms. Those came home with them on Friday and Saturday. The high schoolers all have Chromebooks, grades 8 through 12. So they all have the bulk of their learnings happening using these Chromebooks. And at the elementary level, there's a daily session that happens online, coupled with a lot of activities that the students are doing offline throughout the day. In terms of our cafeteria staff, we have our cafeteria workers are putting together lunches for all students who need them. Typically, school districts provide lunches for the free and reduced families during the school year. We do lunch and breakfast. We offer lunch and breakfast for all students. We fully recognize that given the rapidly changing financial situations of some families, that there are some families that last week wouldn't have qualified for free and reduced lunch, and today are very much in need. So any child who is under 18 can come to Harwich to the high school and pick up a breakfast and a lunch each day, or their family member could get them a breakfast and lunch, and the same thing over at the middle school in Chatham. So we have 2 distribution sites. We are also working collaboratively with the YMCA Cape Cod, and today opened a emergency daycare center at Harwich Elementary School for first responders and other critical personnel who need daycare in order for them to do their job. So that started 6 o'clock this morning, and that site's open from 6 to 11 p.m. to support members in our community who need to operate in order to have us function as a society here out on the elbow of the Cape.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions for Scott? Joe, going back to you, you mentioned, one item we have on our agenda that I want to explore a little more is the whole issue of the construction here on 137. Sounds like we're still in limbo, but just come back to that when that's on the agenda.
Yes, I'd be able to speak to that under old business item B specifically, and then if you wanted to build off that for general conversation for other projects, we could.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? If not, we don't have in this meeting, because we're still basically closed to the public. We hope to have that resolved by a meeting that we're scheduling for Thursday. And Scott's been working very hard to allow access to the public, probably at the tail end of the meeting, so we can get their input. But moving, nothing also on consent agenda. Next item is a public hearing on the school budget. And I'll turn that over to you, Scott. I know everything's so much in the air now. We're in the process, I think, of having to revisit our budget with all the turmoil we have going on. So I'm not sure how much detail you want to get into at this time or not. But Scott, I'll turn it over to you folks.
This, I feel like, it's the oddest budget conversation I've never been quite used to giving anything that deals with a budget without Katie sitting next to me. It's not quite the same thing to see her in a little window in the corner of my screen. So I think last time that we were with you, we did a budget presentation that I think at the time, some of the things that hadn't been known, as we didn't know where health insurance would fall. We knew that that we had a elementary ELA, or English Language Arts curriculum, that we were hoping to roll out in the upcoming year, and we were still working through with our teachers which elementary curriculum to go with. So that was a bit of a wild card out there. And I also know that Joe had reached out to me to ask, is there areas in our budget that we could go and trim to reduce at the end of the day the overall assessment. So so what we have done in there is we know that the health insurance came in at a 0% increase for actives for the next fiscal year, which was a good budget thing for us. It positioned us to look at how do we use that? How do we use that money? The conversation that we were having with the school committee is that with the 0% increase in health insurance, it would allow the school district, rather than to phase in an ELA curriculum over a number of years, we would be able to get that ELA curriculum and do it in one rollout rather than over a series of years. On the other hand, in terms of budget reductions, we went into our budget and identified roughly about $91,000 of reductions that we could make in a number of lines, and so that at the end of the day, the budget that we shared with the school committee at their last meeting and that they voted incorporates all of those different factors in it. It incorporates that the known when it comes to health insurance, it incorporates a $91,000 reduction in the operating budget, which would then reduce the assessment to Harwich. But it also gets at one of our strategic initiatives, which is to get that new ELA curriculum for the elementary schools. So I can stop there to just kind of wait for questions, or if Katie has anything else that she'd like to chime in on, I'll open it up to her too.
Katie? I'm afraid we're not hearing you right now, even though your mic is on. Well, while Katie's working at that, anyone from the board have questions for Scott? I'll go around. Ed? You have to turn your mic on, Ed.
I'm fine.
Okay. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I could have waited until the end, but my question is going to be the same as it was last year, Scott. I never got an answer to that. The overhead costs across all domains, the superintendent's office, the schools, I'd like that split out. I know that the community engagement specialist last year turned out to be portions of FTE that were cobbled together, so I'm not real interested in names or anything, but I would like to be able to associate the overhead carrying costs to the number of students that we've got this year versus last year versus the year before.
So I can't do that right off right
No, I wasn't expecting it right now, but
it's something that Katie and I can definitely get you.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Don, anything else?
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the red line version of the other document.
Scott, you were going to send this, I think, a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I can just share where we are with that. We have a document. I can send you over the document that has the changes that that you picked up last time, Don, in it. We also needed to share that document with the one other entity besides our two town meetings that have to chime in, and that's with the Department of Education. So we sent the corrected red line to the Department of Education to go get their feedback, with giving them we need it back in time for town meeting. And I think at the moment, COVID-19 has derailed them a little bit. So I don't know where their timeline is on when we're going to get the feedback back that we need to inform your board and the Chatham board.
Thank you, Scott. Michael?
Good evening, Scott. If you could just, on the medical, when you gave your original budget presentation to us, I believe the number was, you had plugged in, was a 5%. Was it 5%? Katie's shaking her head yes. So
Katie seems to be nodding yes.
Okay. And then you gave back, what percentage of the 5% did you give back after the budget was presented to us? Or reallocate, I should say. Or both. I can't hear Katie, unfortunately.
Katie, unfortunately, we're still not hearing you.
Katie, try.
So in the slide deck that we put into the selectmen's agenda, there's a slide, it's number 26, that's in our budget presentation that has the FY21 strategic initiative and discusses how we go about funding the total ELA curriculum. So in that, part of it is funded by using the available funds from the 0% health insurance increase, which comes up to $245,191.
Okay, Scott, I have that, and I understand that. I guess my question, though, is if we originally had 5% built into this budget when you gave your presentation, how did we go from 5% that you expected you were going to pay in health insurance to then reallocating it to curriculum instead of giving the 5% back? You didn't need it to begin with, and and just so everyone's clear where I'm at, you have a $983,000 increase in your budget this year. And this is a year that we said, the board voted that we wanted a 2% budget or less than a 2% budget. And a lot of departments in the town felt some pain with some reductions, and we did come in with a very responsible budget to the town. But I'm concerned that you had a 5% number in there. You didn't need the curriculum, but then you didn't have the increase, and now you need the curriculum. And if you're looking at taking 245,000 off of the 983, that would drop your budget increase to the town to 738,000. And in my opinion, at that point, we'd be getting there.
So just to be clear, it's not that we didn't need the curriculum. We needed the curriculum. It was kind of a question of, were we going to be able to roll out the curriculum in 1 year or roll out the curriculum over the course of several years? And you know, there are costs that would be involved if we had to roll it out over several years, where we'd have to bring trainers back in to train in the buildings. But it was a decision that we made as an administration in consultation with the school committee to get to that place of saying, okay, it makes sense for us to get the ELA curriculum up and going across the board for both elementary schools. It's the ELA curriculum is really that last piece for us that never really was regionalized. They were doing ELA differently at Harwich Elementary School than at Chatham Elementary School, in part because they had different books and different curricular resources. This provides us an ability to have both buildings having the same curriculum resources, having the same professional development, and being on the same, I kind of joke about it, being in both the same book and on the same page when it comes to an ELA curriculum.
I guess I understand your explanation, but I'm still stuck on that you were willing not to do it. And I think there's a gap between what I'm willing to vote as one board member, what I'm willing to vote for your budget, what your budget is. If we could just go on to the excess and deficiency, what do you have left in your excess and deficiency account after you use the 550 and pay for a portion of this curriculum out of E&D?
So I believe that I am on the correct slide, and Ms. Isario might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in that budget presentation, slide 21 shows where our excess and deficiency is. So at the moment, the excess and deficiency is certified at $2,095,281. We in this are using 550,000 of excess and deficiency is what we went into the budget conversations to offset our budget. And then we have an additional $189,809 that are being used out of the excess and deficiency to support that, to pick up the other piece of the cost of an ELA curriculum for pre-K through 4, or sorry, K through 4.
So your balance is $1.5 million or $1.4 million?
I'm waiting to see if Katie nods, but I believe that would be correct.
Okay.
If I can interrupt, Katie, you can call in, turn off your computer and call in by phone and participate by phone.
Okay, and I think I'm wrapping up here, but the last question, I guess, Scott, is over the last 6 years, when during the school year, or if ever, have you used any of the excess and deficiency during the school year or during a budget cycle?
So the answer is we can't use excess and deficiency during a school year. We can only build our use of excess and deficiency into a budget. In order for us to use excess and deficiency during a school year, we would have to go to the select boards, say we need to use excess and deficiency. We would have to have an affirmative vote from both select boards to use it, Alternatively, I think the legislation works that if the select boards opt not to go and move on us using it, that we can use it. It's sort of like a lack of a vote allows the district to use it. But the long and short is we have never, during the course of the year, we have used excess and deficiency ever since FY 14 to help offset the cost of the assessments to the two towns. So keep in mind that that in FY 12, where a new regional school district had no excess and deficiency, and slowly but surely, as the excess and deficiency has gone up, we've been at a place where we can use some of that money each year to try to stabilize an assessment to the two towns in any given year. By statute, we can't go and have an excess and deficiency over 5%. Anything over 5% needs to roll back during the budgeting process to the towns.
Thank you, that's all I have.
If I could chime in, Scott and Michael, I'm understanding the discussion about the 5% and using that for curriculum. The decision, I don't want to simplify it too much, but you felt it was better to spend it this year because it was going to cost more money in future years if you brought it back. My concern about that is that our need with all that's going on is to trim our budgets this year, even if it does cost us a little more in years 2 and 3. So if I understood the discussion right, I would still like that to be maybe some more discussion going forward. Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Larry. Scott, could you, and forgive my ignorance here, could you describe to me again of the excess and deficiency, the 500,000 that you just spoke of? How was that? What has been done with that?
So what we have used is we go into each budget cycle looking at how much of the excess and deficiency should we as a school district use to help offset the costs of the assessment, so to bring down the assessment on the two towns, while at the same time the school committee also needs to look at excess and deficiency and say, how much should we maintain in that account to make sure that we're stable year to year, so that something does happen. And I could use as an example, right now as a town and as a regional school district, the one budget factor that that none of us were thinking about going into my budget presentation or Joe's budget presentation before the town is coronavirus and COVID-19 and all of these closures that are happening both on the school side and the town side have the potential to impact our budget. And excess and deficiency, just like free cash or a stabilization fund, is places that the district or the town can go back to say, okay, is this an emergency situation that we need to stabilize or smooth things out till we get to the other side?
Right. So of the amount that was, whether it was 500 or 400 or whatever, what percent went to credit Harwich and what percent went to credit Chatham?
So the way it works, and I think last time when we were before the board, Steve, I think you asked a great question that Katie and I were going back in to look at when we use excess and deficiency funds to offset assessments. How does it play out in the mathematical way? And so it plays out the exact same way that the two districts are what our 3-year rolling average is of foundation enrollment. So Harwich, I'd have to spin down through the presentation. Harwich is pretty much 3/4 of our enrollment, and Chatham 1/4.
Okay.
Maybe I could probably chime in with the two decimal
Yeah, for
point.
some reason in the presentation there was an implication that it was split 50-50, but if it's split the way the percentages work, that's fine. I had never really gotten the answer to that. So
Yeah,
if you're Okay,
Yeah,
okay. The other,
not 50-50.
yeah, the other concern I have, and while I'm certainly not opposed to, you know, your move on curriculum, I do think we're going to have to rethink an awful lot of how we approach every budget in the town, because I cannot imagine that the revenues of our town, as well as every town on Cape Cod, are going to take a major hit as the summer comes to us and we don't have people down here, and the revenues that we normally expect to come in are not going to arrive on our doorstep the way we expect. Result is, I think all of us, whether it be the school or all of our departments, we're all going to be looking again at how we can deal with this budget and a shortfall, which we don't even see right now, even though Joe and Carol have done a fantastic job, I think, dealing with what the deficit was, the 1.8 million. So I'm not saying I'm opposed to the budget, the school budget. I'm just saying I think we're all going to have a big awakening here as we move into the rest of this year as it relates to the revenues of this town. So I think the school committee and the school administration are going to have to think about that and in conjunction with the town administration.
And we're aware of that on the town side. I was on a call this morning with the Chatham sort of emergency planning group, and the town manager was raising a similar concern, just with regard to all departments in Chatham. Just, you know, what will the long-term impact of all of these, you know, closures and everything have on tax revenues that are coming in, and then how does that, you know, trickle down impact each of our departments?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Steve.
you. Thank you.
Dana, can you move to?
Mr. Chair, before you move to the FinCom, can I ask one more question? This is Don.
Sure. I mean, that's what I'm asking. Oh, Don, I'm sorry. Looking the wrong one. Don, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just off of what a number of board members have said, I'm curious, and I don't ask for the answer tonight, but the excess and deficiency fund, just based on our last meeting, you don't end a year if you have money and give the money back. You plow it into excess and deficiency. So my question is, you're allocating it into the budget, and it sounds like you're subsidizing it to the public, but I'm just curious, has there ever been a year where you didn't wind up putting money back into excess and deficiencies?
We have put money back into excess and deficiency ever since FY14. So keep in mind that FY13 we had only $514,000 certified as our excess and deficiency, and as a new regional school district, our goal was within 7 years to get up to 4% of our budget in excess and deficiency, to grow that account. That was in, you know, sort of our long range planning. And as it started to grow faster than that, we started to return more monies to the town than we had initially planned on, because we were in a better fiscal place with regard to that account.
Perhaps you misunderstood me, because you don't give us money back at the end of the year. When you're giving it back at the beginning of the budget cycle based on what you had originally budgeted. And then if you draw it down, you're counting that as it coming back. The thing is, you alluded to free cash a second ago. It's not like free cash. We'd go bankrupt if we spend free cash on continuing operations. But it sounds like you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. If you always wind up at the end of the year with money that you're putting back into excess and deficiencies, and you take out money at the beginning of the year, you're not actually refunding anything. You're basically netting out.
Katie, can you talk yet? No.
Katie,
Star six to unmute, Katie.
She's on her phone.
Now
Star
star
6 on your phone.
Yeah, but she was putting it on the keyboard.
I'm unmuted now.
Now we can hear you.
This is your lucky day. So, Dawn, I'm not 100% sure. The process has always been when we set up the assessment, at the top we put the total budget, and then we do the offsets. So the offsets are the Chapter 70 money, the charter school reimbursements, miscellaneous revenues, interest that we earn, and then another piece of that is the excess and deficiency that we're going to use to support the budget. So, you know, part of it is having the conversation of, you know, what do we have available for excess and deficiency, and how much should we use to offset the assessment? So I don't know what you mean about netting out, but that's the process that we use. And just like the towns, when the district goes to borrow, it's important that we have, you know, show a stabilization of a district for bonding purposes as well.
What I was trying to get at is kind of what Stephen was trying to get at. So based on what economic times are, I'm assuming you put money at the end of last fiscal year into excess and deficiencies. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you know how much that amount last year at the end of the fiscal year was?
It was just over $400,000.
Okay, and then you start out the beginning of the year offering up $500,000. The reality is that there's only a $75,000 spread. Is that you're using last year's money to augment this year's budget, and you keep pushing it that way forward. We just were upside down by $1.8 million. We had to tell public safety, we had to tell Department of Public Works and a bunch of people that we had to pull money from them. I guess my point is, if this is for an emergency, I can't imagine what an emergency would look like if this isn't it.
Point taken. And just, I think Dr. Carpenter mentioned it too, in the PowerPoint presentation, there is a excess and deficiency slide that gives you the amount that was certified every year and then the amount that we use to support the budget every year. It kind of gives you how it gets to the, you know, how it built up to the point that it is now.
Thank you, Katie. Is that,
Thank you.
Dana, let me turn it over to you and Finance Committee.
I think I'll go first on this only because I also did some work on that excess and deficiency account. And I see it growing at $770,000 a year and being taken out $550,000 as far as the average over those last few years, according to your slide. And it just seems to be building faster than you're using it. This is a year when we're going to be asking to use it, I guess, if you want to do the curriculum. I'm glad Dr. Carpenter mentioned the 4%. That was the original goal, to get it to 4%, and now it's up over 5%, which is also against the rules. So I'd like to see some more use of that. Can we get just an update on where you are with union contracts for next year? Just a general thumbnail.
So we go into negotiations starting the beginning of next year. So I'll be encouraging the school committee to work with myself and the administration on what they hope to see out of contract negotiations, and then we'll be launching into those with our teachers and our MREA, the Monomoy Regional Educators Association, covers our teachers, our clerical staff, our instructional assistants, and our cafeteria workers. So all but a relatively small portion of the district are in that union. So we'll hopefully see those negotiations starting next fall and hopefully wrapping up sooner rather than later. So they're not on the FY21 budget, but we'll see any negotiations hit FY22.
So you have a settled percentage for FY21?
Correct. That's a 2%.
Okay, because the overall salary and wages was up almost 5%, and I just wondered what the extra.
That's in steps.
Yeah, I know that at one point I saw a slide that said something like that 90% of the increase was due to contractual. I'm just wondering what the other 10% was.
Okay, that's right. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, so the part of it was the curriculum purchase, and the other would be capital. We restored the $50,000 to fund the stabilization account that we had cut out of the FY20 budget, and we restored the $50,000 there. But it's that and other school services, salaries and wages, which is also those are our cafeteria staff, coaches, nurses, and just keep in mind that we have a 2% salary increase, but there's lane changes and steps that staff get as well.
Okay. I have two more, actually one more, on the article for the agreement, and I guess this is both to the Board of Selectmen and to the school committee. I know last year the Finance Committee met with the Chatham Finance Committee, and they were surprised to learn too that agreement allows the schools to buy land. And I think that's something that I know I had a problem with, I know they had a problem with, and I think we're going to address it again in a joint meeting before town meetings. But that's something I'd just encourage both the selectmen and the school committee to look at in terms of, do we want the schools buying land in the towns? I can see, signing agreements with the towns. I can see all kinds of safeguards to make sure that the school has the property they need. But when it comes to buying land, I'm not sure if I'm in favor of that. I'll go through our board.
Please, Dana.
John and Tom, any comments from you guys?
Yeah, I have one. I would just like to know, just the high school alone, as far as the admin, the weighting of the admin versus the school population, principals, assistant principals, staff versus students. I would like to see that, because as compared to other high schools throughout the Cape.
Dan?
We can put that together for you, Tom.
Yeah, I have no comment. No questions.
I know Angelo was on the phone. Are you able to speak, Angelo?
I think so.
You are. Go ahead. Any questions for the schools?
No comment. No question.
Okay.
So John, Katie, to your point, we could send that information through Joe Powers and Carol, and then they could get that information, or whomever just asked about comparing the administrative staffing. So I'll filter it through the office in Harwich.
That was Tom Sherry.
Okay.
All right, Dale?
Got something else?
No questions either, thank you.
Brian?
I have no questions right now, thank you.
How about Mark Emmers? Did he make it on at all?
Yep, no additional questions.
Okay, we have a full board. I'm all set, thank you.
Are you missing Tina or some others? Oh, that's cool, I'm sorry. Scott, do any of the other school board members want to care to comment?
So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to, again, if I could remind everybody that according to our records, we don't have a full quorum of the committee yet. So I just want to be mindful of the quorum requirements for the open meeting law.
Okay, thank you, Joe. We'll move on. I would like to just close simply saying that, as Steve's mentioned, is we're all aware of it. We're going to have some tough decisions to make because we're definitely going to be far below our revenue projections that we build our budgets on. So I would assume that this will be an ongoing discussion in the next few weeks. Hopefully not much longer than that. I'm hoping that things, as we all hope, the flu will go away and we'll start to recover. But I'd ask Scott and Joel to work on the scheduling that we can get back together as we learn more, as this begins to settle down, and we can give some more direction on what we have to do. It's not going to be pleasant, but it is what it is right now.
Larry?
Any other comments, Michael?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes, thank you, Larry. What exactly are we waiting to get back to? It's my understanding that the school committee has already voted this, and if the board really didn't ask any questions relative to any givebacks from the school on the budget. So when do you want to vote this? And I guess I would ask Dr. Carpenter, is his intention to go back to the school committee and see if they want to use more or give back that percent that they used on the healthcare that didn't go up? Is there any intent on the school to give back some more money, or do we want to just vote this? Because I didn't hear anything that we're waiting.
I'll let Scott answer it first, and I'll weigh in, Michael, and I'll ask others.
So I think ultimately, I think the elephant in the room is going to be, what do Joe and Carol see or project to be the trickle down effect from COVID-19 on the economics of the two towns, or at least on Harwich, and what that is going to look like on our budget and other town budgets to how we may need to go and radically rethink the budget. So I think this is what the school committee felt going into the budget conversation, using a non-COVID-19 lens. But I think that's also, that also is, the elephant in the room for all of us when it comes to budgets and what next year really needs to look like. So I think if there's some guidance that's coming on what we should be thinking about, I think that's something that we can take back to our budget subcommittee and then back to our school committee as a whole. Because at the vote that the committee took is a vote that sort of sets what the budget is for next year, but there's also an ability for them to have that budget decrease. It just can't increase from the vote that they took.
Thank you, Scott. And Michael, to you, I think I'd like to wait at least a couple of weeks. We have a notice from the governor to basically stop most activities until I think April 6th. That's probably a little earlier, but I knew, of course, the school had voted, but these are, I wouldn't say crisis, but we should look to have possibly reconsideration of some of our budgets as we go forward.
Thank you, Larry. I would make it clear to everyone listening that this isn't about COVID-19 at this point to me. This was about the budget that was presented based on the budget message that the board gave. And I think COVID-19 might add to that. And I think at some point the board needs to make its vote so the school committee and school administration knows where the board stands. And maybe the majority of the board would, and then we could come back for some changes based on COVID-19. But at this point, I think that the board needs to make it clear which direction that they're leaning so the school committee understands.
Mr. Chair, this is Tina Games. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I wanted to get some clarification. Sharon Stout has joined our call here, and that gives us 4, so all Harwich members are here. However, we have a school committee of 8 members, and 4 come from Chatham. So I think our quorum, is it based on Harwich and Chatham combined, or is it all Harwich?
It would be based, quorum in this case would be the full membership of the regional school committee, just as if you were at town meeting. So it would be at least 5.
Okay. And the other question, and I'm going to pose this to our superintendent, I believe any changes that Harwich is requesting that we consider also has to be weighed with our Chatham colleagues, and we have to have, even if all 4 members of Harwich agreed, we still have to have one person from the Chatham side agree as well. So I just want to make sure everybody is aware that Chatham does have a voice in this too.
Yeah, that would be correct. So there has to be an affirmative from at least one Chatham person.
I would agree with that, although our vote would be our opinion is the Harwich Board has to go back to the Monomoy Board. I think we all understand that. Michael, do you wish to make a specific motion then?
Well, I just want to to be clear, and just so Tina knows, I wasn't saying what the school committee should do. That's a separate vote, and that's probably at a school committee meeting. This is the Board of Selectmen that I'm talking about. You know, Larry, I'm a no vote at this point, and want them to go back, and I'm obviously willing to make a motion and reject. I would move that we reject the school committee's budget.
Do you care to add the two reasons that you stated, so they get specific in that?
You know, well, I think that should be clear in the conversation. If anyone missed it, it's really because of the reallocation of the healthcare costs in the amount of $245,000 to go to curriculum that they were willing not to spend. And then I would ask also that they would consider using some more of their E&D. You know, there's a process if there's an emergency, you know, towards the end of the school year, and they can go back to town meeting or call for a town meeting and get money. But we don't get into this money during the year, and there aren't emergencies. And I do understand for borrowing and bonding, but in a year like this, and a year that we are looking to get that budget down and go back to town meeting with a responsible budget, I think that the $983,000 increase is too much. And listening to town meeting last year, I think the operating budget passed by about 25 votes. People are concerned. And now I think we have more to be concerned about. So.
And that's a separate issue from the flu.
Right.
Is there a second?
I don't know, that was a mighty long motion.
Well, my motion is to reject the school committee budget as presented.
Second.
Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, Steve Ford. I'm not sure it's appropriate to take the vote at this point. I mean, I think that Scott made quite clear that they recognize what could be a dire situation we're going to find ourselves in here, and could potentially go back and speak with the school committee relative to after a discussion with Joe Powers and Carol as to what we might need them to do, and we might want to give them some time to think about this in conjunction with their conversations with our town administration. Not that I disagree with Michael that there couldn't be some savings that would be found here, and it would be important for us to take a look at the excess and deficiency as well. But I'm not sure this vote really means anything at this stage of the game, unless Scott is telling us if we don't vote tonight, there is some issue for them relative to bonding and other types of contracts. He certainly sounded, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, like you would continue to have discussions with Joe Powers and Carol relative to the situation the town finds itself in, and maybe reconsider some of the things that you've been thinking about for this year.
Yeah, I'm a realist on what the trickle-down effect of COVID-19 closures are. I think that we're fooling ourselves as a school district and as a town if we think that this isn't going to impact FY21 in some shape. And I think that, you know, it's the one thing that we didn't see, you know, I think on the town side or school side going into any of these budget conversations or numbers. And I think we probably need to do a little step backwards, think about what would the impacts be. You know, when I first became a superintendent, it was the year Lehman Brothers collapsed, and that had a huge impact on the funds that were available in the town, and one of the towns that that was feeding a regional school district that I was with.
Thank you, Scott. Any other?
If I could, Larry, Scott, is there a necessity for a vote this evening by the board?
No.
I think I think that's your call. I don't think there's a necessity for the vote, but I think we do need to get clarity from both towns, what they think the impacts might be, because I do think that realistically, we're going to need to go back and rethink, just like I think every town department is going to have to rethink what life is going to look like after this.
All I have, Larry.
Mr. Chair, it's
Yes.
Don. I hear what Steve says, and it's very reasonable. The problem is that the school committee has voted this, and I wouldn't be voting on I know Michael isn't, from what he's saying. I wouldn't be voting on this based on COVID-19. It's based on the methodology. They still got $1.5 million left in that excess and deficiencies fund, which is for ongoing problems in the coming year. I'm viewing this more like it isn't what we had asked for. If you forgive me, the school committee can vote anything it wants to, but it has to get it approved by the selectmen in each town. It has to go on the warrant. It has to go through town meetings. So the school committee is the beginning of the chain, but they've already opined, unless they're saying that this is an interim proposal and they still haven't voted on a final budget figure yet. Is that what the committee did, or is this the budget?
If I could, Mr. Chair, Steve Ford, the indication is that they have the ability to decrease the budget, not increase the budget. And I think the expressions made by Scott in the last few minutes have been that, they're willing to look at the situation after discussions with our administrative staff and the selectmen. And therefore, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that kind of answers what Dawn is saying here. Even though they have voted on it, this could change. And I don't think there's a necessity to have a number of different votes. Let's see if we can, come to some conclusions here with the school committee relative to where we think the budget should be. Again, I have a sympathy with Michael relative to even if we had no COVID-19 right now. And while I appreciate the desire for the move on curriculum quickly, we do have a very tight budget, and one that the people of the town have showed great concern about. So I do think we need to rethink that a little bit. But anyway, that's my comment.
Larry?
Yes, Michael.
So, thank you, Stephen, for clarifying that. I don't want Dr. Carpenter, or the school committee to leave this meeting thinking that this has anything to do with COVID-19, in my opinion. I agree with Don, with what Don said, and the budget that I'm rejecting, just so everybody's clear, is the budget that was brought forward pre-COVID-19, and I don't want to use this as a tool for them to go back and reassess the budget based on COVID-19. I want them to go back and reassess the budget based on the Board of Selectmen's guidelines going into this. And that's the starting point. As far as COVID-19, are we going to go back to Council on Aging? And I think that they told us that their $7,000 cut was going to end a lot of services, or youth services, their $825 cut was going to make it so that they couldn't operate. School committee has a $983,000 increase, and this has nothing to do with COVID-19. And the message that I'm asking the board to send is that we're rejecting your budget as you presented it. We can always go back and talk about COVID-19 after we finally get some effects from it. But right now, we're asking for a more responsible budget, what they presented before the COVID-19 crisis. That's why I made the motion, because I think the board, and maybe the majority of the board is okay with their budget. But I haven't heard Dr. Carpenter say he's going to go back and recommend that they lower the budget because the budget is too high and because they reallocated that money towards curriculum when it wasn't on the table to begin. That's my message, and that's my motion.
So at this point, we have a motion. It has been seconded to vote to reject the school budget as presented several weeks ago. The issue of any food related, and Scott, I very much appreciate the fact that we have to go back and relook at budgets. That's a separate issue. If there's no more discussion, I'd ask for a roll call vote. Steve, I'll start with you.
No.
Don?
Aye.
Ed? Ed? Michael?
I'm an aye.
And I'm an aye. So we've lost Ed temporarily, so it's 4 to in favor of Michael's position, 3 rather than 1 opposed.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, that should be referred to as 3 in favor, 1 opposed, 1, what we would have to consider abstention.
1 sleeping.
Wait a minute, is he, Ed, are you here now? No, we've lost Ed, so 1 abstention. Yeah. Okay?
He's back.
He's back. Ed, did you hear what was going on?
A bit. My battery died. I heard most of it, though.
We were taking a vote on whether to reject the budget, the school budget that was presented to us pre-COVID-19 worries that we have. So it's directed only at that, not on what we may have to do going forward as we learn the economic damage of the flu.
Okay.
So vote for is a vote to reject. Against is to accept the school budget that was presented.
Wait, to vote to accept this budget of the school board as presented.
Okay, so you reject the motion, is what that means. Okay, so Joe, for your record then, it's 3 in favor of the motion as presented and 2 opposed.
Correct.
Larry?
Thank
Steve
you all.
Ford.
Steve?
Larry, could I make one comment?
Sure may.
I don't know how you can look at a budget and say, let's ignore COVID-19. But anyway, that's my only comment.
And that's a good comment. In no way wanting to reject it. It's just I think we need a little more time to sort through that. Joe and Carol and the Scott and Katie. Excuse me, Katie. I don't know how long you're still involved, but
if I may, that's
see
why.
what the revenues may look like when we increase our precision of our assumptions, if you will.
Okay.
Steve?
I think that's why, taking a vote at this point is, well, obviously we took the vote. I'm just making my comments about the fact that what you just said shows that the school committee and the administration of the school committee is willing to go back and look at this thing. So anyway, I'm not sure it was a vote that accomplishes anything, but we'll see.
Okay, thank you all. We'll move next to the agenda is the, I need to put my glasses on so I can read.
Mr. Chairman, before you read, I apologize. The next item is an item that only pertains to the Harwich Board of Selectmen. Did you perhaps want to take item 9 under old business, item A, joint meeting between Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee, out of order for a statement?
Good suggestion, Joe. And I'll turn it over for you to start this discussion.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's proper to have just a consensus from the board to take it out of order.
I'll ask for a consensus. I'll just do it normal by roll call. Ed?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So Joe, we've moved and
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that. And I think it's appropriate while everybody that was here for the last discussion hear this information. But Mr. Chairman, it'd be my recommendation that the board postpone any discussion on the proposed budgets and proposed articles beyond what we've had this evening. There's an effort to have another meeting, as you've mentioned, on Thursday at 6:30. But at this point, I do want to advise all parties that there is no likelihood that the board will the town will be able to meet its required actions, nor do I expect that we will be cleared to have a town meeting on May 4th. In addition to that, there was an emergency law that was enacted today that will allow the town of Harwich and any other town that has an election before May 30th to move that election after May 30th. So at this point, I just want to bring everyone up to speed that neither the annual town meeting nor the annual town election should be expected to occur in the times that they were originally scheduled in the charter. There is an abundance of guidance from KP Law and other circles, steps that the town can take as soon as Thursday, March 26th to affect those.
Thank you, Joe. Carol, do you care to comment?
Hi, everyone. How are you tonight? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
We
Looks like
can.
we're all fine. Pictures I'm looking at.
I think it would be wise to postpone any discussion about a budget, given the nature of where we are today. I think that there are significant changes that will happen to the budget for this year, and the proposed budget that will be brought forward again. So certainly you can have discussions about things that have been presented to you at your meetings, but I'm not sure they're all exactly relevant at this point.
Thank you, Carol. Any questions or comments from the board? And then Dana, I'll go to you for your committee. Ed?
No.
Don?
No.
Michael?
No.
Steve? Steve, did I lose you?
Mr. Ford, I may have muted you and tried to get rid of some echo, so star 6 to turn you back on. I apologize.
Steve? I'll move to Dana and then we'll go back to Steve. Dana, for your comments?
I said no.
Oh, okay. Steve said no. Dana? Can I turn it over to your committee?
Sure. I guess my only comment on the warrant is that there's a lot of, we're way behind. Of course, even if we're going to move the meeting, we're way behind. If we're going to have to meet in this fashion, it's just difficult to get through, especially with quite a few new members and so forth. So I was hoping that the Finance Committee could have one of these meetings with just us and the public, however we do it, so that we could maybe do a lot of the housekeeping stuff and get some of the articles voted that are traditional or don't have a problem, and go through some of those things that are non-financial, go through maybe the CPC articles, stuff like that, so that we could get a lot of those voted and some of the reasons written up and get that housekeeping kind of stuff done that skips the budgets for now and skips the big money kind of stuff. That's the only thing that I was shooting for. If we think that there's going to be actual meetings where we all sit at the table again before a town meeting, and we can get those things done before we go to warrant, before we go to print and all those kinds of stuff, then I would back off of that. But I'm just hoping that we could have one Finance Committee meeting at some point down the road to go through the warrant as best we can.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to respond if I may.
Joe, please.
Sure, and I respect where the chair of the Finance Committee is coming from. I think it might be helpful if all present understand that we're looking at potentially pushing out the entire schedule where it stood 2 weeks ago. From that point forward, about a month to a month and a half out. We're still getting daily direction. So the last page of the packet was the old timeline that was based on May 4th, and my whiteboard is now frozen in time at 51 days out from that. We're long since past that, so what I'm suggesting is we might be in a situation where we would have to start some of the processes over again, because the warrant that I'm discussing would be essentially, to some degree, a different warrant. The town had until next Monday, the 30th, to affect any decisions with that warrant, and the latest information we're having is that's a moot point right now. The other thing that we have to be mindful of is it's not just a warrant for town meeting, it's a warrant for the town election. Many municipalities, not the least of which is town of Harwich, was waiting for that legislation to be dispatched. It was dispatched today. I got notice of that from Representative Peak late this afternoon. And again, it talks about municipal elections that were scheduled prior to May 30th being allowed to occur after May 30th. So I think we're quite possibly looking at a mid to late June, if we're able to do it within what we know to be the structure of the current fiscal year 20. It's entirely possible that the state may have to enact a 1/12 budget mechanism and extend the boundaries of the fiscal years to affect that as well. So I appreciate where the Finance Committee Chair is coming from. I would just ask that for this week, if we could hold off on that, and staff is working on updating the board for a deeper discussion of this Thursday evening, March 26th.
Yeah, I have no problem waiting this week or another week or when someone says go, but I just want to, under these conditions, it's harder to maneuver and take these votes and so forth. We just want to, at some point, get started. So when you believe that we're in a good spot for that, I just hope you keep that in mind.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Danny, want to go through the rest of your committee?
Yeah, anybody else want to weigh in on where we are right now? John?
I have no comment, and but Joe, I guess this is a procedural type thing. Do we have to have a budget in place by the end of June, or is that 1/12 you spoke of?
At this point in time, because of the state of emergency, the Commonwealth is looking at all possible measures, including a 1/12 budget. Again, everything I've read has talked about town meetings occurring perhaps no sooner than, in some cases, no sooner than June 1st. So if you cascade the calendar out from that, there's an implied recognition by the Commonwealth that we're going to see a change to the fiscal year parameters. So I no longer feel bound by the original structure, if you will. We're getting information, quite honestly, on a daily basis. I think the mindset, again, is thinking well into the spring.
Thank you, Jim.
Tom?
Just, this is unprecedented. It's just, we have to take it as it comes. Everything would have to be pushed out from what we normally deal with. So it's just, it's going to happen when it's going to happen.
Angelo, you still on? Angelo? Mark?
Nothing to
add. Dan?
Excuse me. Yes, Dan, I would agree with your suggestion that we need to somehow categorize these, because of the lack of time, and we're going to get through some of these fairly quickly, is to categorize the warrants as some of the ones that are less material and more straightforward, separate those from the ones that may require some discussion and further analysis.
Yeah, we can do that pretty easily once we get to a point where we're gonna go over those things.
Yeah.
Dale?
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I think there's a handful of things in the warrant that are not financial in nature, but there's some pretty, significant language changes, like the conservation language. There could kind of get through those and understand the impact of those changes and have a intelligent discussion about them, we'd be in a much better position to get those out of the way when the dust settles and we're back online.
Brian?
I agree with you, Dana. I think it's a thoughtful use of time if we go ahead and get some of the more rote processes out of the way so that we have more time available to dive deeply into the detailed portions of the warrant.
Okay, we will wait until the town administrator gives us some guidance on that, but as long as he keeps that in mind, we're anxious to get going, I guess. That's all I have. Anybody else, anything else?
Thank you, Dana and FinCom on that. As Joe and along with Carol and the rest of us will come back in the near future as we revise and relook at the budget. There's no other comments. Move on to new business. Joe, you wish to handle this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if you wanted to give the rest is for the board if you want to allow people time to drop off if they so choose.
You're asking me to be kind, huh? So Dana, I'll try to be nice to you. You can drop off if you so choose.
I'm going to hang on, but I'll certainly report back to the rest of my committee. If any of them want to leave, they're allowed to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Joe, did we lose you?
No, you still have me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Just make a notation that the Finance Committee adjourned at 7:48.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So under your agenda now, looking at Section 7, new business, item A, discussion and possible vote to waive the hiring freeze for conservation to hire a part-time seasonal shorebird monitor. I would suggest that there are two distinct topics here. And the first might be waiving of hiring freezes. And the second is whether or not we may have staff available to do that function. To the hiring freeze, I would ask the board to, this is completely different than what I was thinking 2.5 weeks ago, of course, but things are completely different from 2.5 weeks ago. I would ask that the board at this time maintain the hiring freeze. The hiring freeze was enacted to help us get a handle on the fiscal year 2021 budget. It was an opportunity to stall hiring actions that may have resulted in layoffs. And given the uncertainty of where we're at for fiscal year 20, as well as fiscal year 21, I think it's appropriate that we keep a hiring freeze in place. I've already advised the department heads that there are no plans presently to conduct any searches unless it is of a critical essential item. I'm thinking, of course, to make sure we have full complements in public safety areas. Specifically to this item, I think this would be an appropriate opportunity for staff because we're on a rotation where all staff are working on a rotation of work from home, rotating until they come back in the rotation to work from physical location. Every employee is being looked to do that so that everybody has a chance to work remotely and also to be engaged in a one-on-one basis to affect social distancing. So I guess a potential hidden benefit, if I can even say that in all of this, is that we have a number of individuals, not the least of which could be conservation staff themselves, that could do this particular function at this time.
Thank you, Joe. And so the end result of that is that we will not move on the new business item tonight.
Okay.
Any discussion, comments? Moving on then to, we covered A on old business. Next is B, is a traffic control plan. And this is a bit broader discussion, Joel. We've had some discussions today about construction in general. 137, you I think you opened the meeting by saying there are still some unknowns you need to clarify, but if you could bring us up to speed on those discussions.
So again, we had to rely upon Governor Baker's order number 13 and definition of essential services and all that. The order itself, the legal language, if you will, consists of 4 full pages of text. The Appendix A, or excuse me, 4¼ pages. Appendix A is a full 9 pages of what is described as essential services relative to the governor's definition, which is a slight modification of the federal definition. The act of construction, if you will, is covered on Appendix Item A. So I just want to put out there that there is nothing that would prohibit, other than perhaps certain considerations on staffing related to it, thinking details and what have you, but construction workers who support the construction, operation, inspection, and maintenance of construction sites and construction projects, including housing construction, are deemed to be essential under the governor's order, under the headline of other community-based essential functions in government operations. So again, construction workers, and that's how we would be describing the work being done on the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, Phase 2, Contracts 1 and 2. The discussion item was a carryover to talk about night hours. What I would like an opportunity for staff to vet tomorrow morning, perhaps have a decision or recommendation in front of the board Thursday evening, is that if we have the contractors proceed, we might be able to ask them to proceed during regular business hours based on the contract, with just an understanding that this is an ever-changing situation, and we might need some flexibility in talking about contract terms, and again, putting a premium on availability of public safety for other purposes if necessary. So it is something that is considered essential, and we can rely upon that. But I do think we need to just validate whether or not we can do this during regular contract hours rather than night hours. While the streets are empty, that's because people are home. Night work might be, I think, an overdue burden on everybody involved. Contractors, employees, engineers, public safety, and what have you. So we're not limited. We don't need to limit them based on essential, non-essential, but I think we should take a look at supporting how much they can do in their respective areas. Now, I know this item gets specifically to Contract 1 for Phase 2. But there are additional impacts that we have to be aware of. There's an impact for Phase 2, Contract 2, and I offer this only for informational purposes because it's not on the agenda. But that contractor is looking to do work that in the original plan would have impacted upon private residences, and there was an expectation that most of that work would have been done during the day when most of the residences were empty. That's no longer the case, so staff is trying to vet what workarounds we may have on that. So that's another way of saying that contract is going to be impacted in the very short term because of the social distancing requirements. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the best I can give at this time.
Okay, Joe, let me ask a couple of questions just specifically on Contract 1.
Yep.
Because that's where we have the most traffic concern problems on going up 137 and the businesses there.
Mm-hmm.
If we take no action tonight, does that work continue until we meet on Thursday?
I don't see any reason why I wouldn't, unless there's concern for the contractor. They're progressing, as I understand it, along that route, and there's no legal impediment to them at this point. I think we just need to be mindful of how we want to do it. It's entirely possible that this might help them expedite their process in that area. Again, I don't ever want to refer to these as silver linings. It's anything but if there's an unintended benefit in all of this, that might be one of them. But there's
So
no,
just be clear, no action keeps them going until Thursday, until we meet again.
I believe that's accurate. I'm not aware of anything that has caused either of the contractors to cease operations completely, and the town has not directed them to cease operations
Okay.
completely.
Thank you, Joe.
Mr.
Any other
Chair?
comments, questions? Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joe, in your deliberations with staff over this, I mean, I spoke with Paul Fox today. And he's under the belief that the governor's current edict has him listed as an essential service. So I don't want to see, I guess further to Larry's question, at what point in the timeline would that put the construction without a travel lane right in front of the Harwich Decorating Plaza?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. Is the question, where are they in location to that plaza right now?
Where are they in time in relation
Can they
to
still get to Howard's Paint?
I don't have any information on that directly, so that's I can follow that up with staff tomorrow morning.
Well, I would hate to see Robert Hour start in that stretch at the same time, you know, on the basis of, yeah, we can shoot through that now, at the same time as the store itself was designated as something that was an essential service. We'd be ironically precluding that from happening, from him being open.
I understand the point completely, and you know, again, it's a 9-page document as to what is essential, and there are, I think, several businesses along that corridor that, by effect of the governor's order, are deemed essential. So we're still in the situation of having to balance essential services in response to COVID-19 versus the ability to continue working because construction work is also essential.
Okay. Thank you,
Well,
Joe.
again, the whole point of the endeavor and the discussion has always been, how can we balance getting the contract done at the same time as allowing that business to continue being open?
And that's a fact, Don. We'll go back, and I'm sure staff go back and look at how we can move this quick, take this out. The one upside is we might possibly get through this quicker than we thought, but we still have to be sure there's some, they can get to the Harwich Paint, for instance, and CVS.
And some of the other medical providers that are on that stretch as well. They've all been deemed essential.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Ed?
No.
Michael?
So why wouldn't we take an action tonight to allow for night work, to give the contractor the ability to work night? And the way that I'm reading the memo, and Joe, certainly I appreciate getting the legal on it, but why wouldn't we take the action to just allow them to, so that they can? And I do believe that based on the conversations we had in the public meeting on this, that there was never going to be access denied to that plaza. It was just going to be a longer route and a longer detour. And given the situation now, I would think that we would try and give the contractor as many tools as we could to get through there as fast as they could. So I don't see any reason not to vote it, because Thursday we could unvote it. But why would we tie their hands behind their back?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can respond, to be blunt, the cost estimates that have come back on night work, if I've heard correctly, appear to be a 30% markup beyond what the town was expecting. Beyond what we were expecting, what they originally said were going to be evening hour costs. And I cannot in good conscience in this date say, go ahead, because we can pay it, because I cannot unwind COVID-19 and everything else we're dealing with a change order that right now appears to be non-negotiable between the parties, given the chasm between expectations of cost.
Ed, you had a comment?
No, I did,
Michael,
but Joe answered it.
Okay. Steve? I think we've lost Steve again, Scott.
No, no comment.
Okay. Let's proceed then. Let me just, if we were to vote, my question, I take your point, Joe. If we were to vote night work and with the condition that it's left up to staff to work out whether they actually proceed or not, does that give us any, give you any more tools to work forward with, Joe?
Not if the board were intending to take this matter up more deeply on Thursday.
Okay. Michael, you comfortable? We can wait till Thursday to,
Yes, given the lack of numbers, absolutely.
okay, yeah. And I know they're working hard to understand the numbers and debate that some. Any other discussion on this? On the this agenda item? If not, we'll move on to the town administrator's reports. And Joe, I think I can respond to item 8 for you. It's changing.
Completely, sir. Yep. I submit, I yield. I have nothing else to report this evening, other than to say that we are prepared for a meeting on Thursday at 6:30 of the board, and any presenters you want us to have to be able to tie in similar to tonight.
Okay.
And again, with the expectation that there's a, for lack of a better phrase, sorry, everybody, open mic for the general public at some point in the meeting.
Thank you. To that point, Scott, you don't show us your picture anymore, but Scott is putting all this together for us and doing a great job. I'm not sure why he's hiding from us, but oh, there he is. Now I know why you're hiding.
Mr. Chairman, I need to interrupt simply to say that you will not be able to see Jamie. She's ensconced behind a bank of monitors, but between
We
she
never
and
see
Scott,
Jamie.
yeah, they've really done remarkable work to ensure constant communication as broadly as possible. So they both have done just fantastic work.
Thank you. I agree. Getting back to Scott, reason not only to thank him as Scott is going to give us procedures for opening this up to more public input for our Thursday meeting, and it looks like the best way to do that will be to do as we're doing now, and then at the end of the meeting, offer 10 or 15 minutes for folks who have, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but for them to call in with their comments or questions about actions we've taken. This only works if it's still open up to the public. My thought is if we were to take an action and vote on it, and we get some comments and questions that we take that will cause us to rethink our position, and I can always call, we can vote on the reconsideration to relook at an action that night. So there's a mechanism for us to walk through, I believe, and still get public input into our decisions. Scott, any further, am I too off based on that?
No, I think you are spot on there, Larry. I do think it's going to come with maybe some complications managing the queue of callers and so forth, but I did put some language together. I'll share that with you tomorrow. We can give it a run and see how we do.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman? Dana DeCosta.
Yes. Oh, Dana, sorry.
No, I just wanted to be asked to be on the invite list for each of your meetings going forward, just so that I can report back to our committee on what's going on.
Joe, I think we can do that.
Certainly. And Mr. Chairman, what I'd also like to add is I would ask that the board start considering, I had mentioned it last week, but you know, if you're meeting Monday and Thursday of this week, we know that April 7th is a critical date based on the governor's order. And I was wondering if the board had flexibility for multiple meetings next week that we could start entertaining dates and times on. I think it's going to be helpful for everybody if we have several meetings of smaller time frame and more in-depth discussion on critical issues.
I don't see anyone shaking their head no, so I'm taking that as a yes.
I don't know. I was thinking of going shopping next week.
Okay.
By yourself.
Yeah.
Don?
Ed?
Larry?
Yes.
On the next meeting with the addition of having the public comment, you apparently scheduled the comments to come at the end of the meeting. If and if the comment maybe alters our thoughts on them, then we have to go through a process of reconsideration. My question is, why not have the comments at the beginning of the meeting? A defined 15-minute period for people to make comments on the a statement on the items we're going to be discussing, so we know we have their input as we go into the discussion, rather than having to have our discussion, take our action, and then find out, oh, well, that's a good thought, maybe we should reconsider.
Good point, Ed. We've talked about that. I know Scott and I have, and Joe. It depends on how we can manage the call-ins. And so I think our first thought was to do what you're saying, and then we have some further discussion. Maybe that we try one, and as we learn technology, we get better at how we manage the call-in flow. We're kind of going through this stepwise. We want to get to where you are. I'm not sure we're going to be there on Thursday already.
Okay.
Any other comments? I would just say one other thing. You've noticed that, especially since we're not seeing each other, we talk by phone. But I have asked Patty to send out draft agendas to each of you before the finalized. I'm doing that just to ensure that the way it works, I'm not missing something that needs to be on there. So I'd ask you to pay attention to that. Those emails that Patty sends back, and then if you have something put on, bring it back to us, and we can either put it on, or it's not priority, and we need to move it on to, so we can keep, as Joe says, we need to keep these meetings shorter because they get difficult to do long. It was more than, for me, hour and a half is probably about as much as I can stay awake for this. But please look at those agendas. I don't want to miss anything. Joe?
Mr. Chairman, can I just weigh in and just remind everybody that, as you mentioned, Patty, Bob, Danielle, and administration have done remarkable work under all the considerations, as have every employee in every department. But I just want to remind everybody that we are under a minimum staffing level requirement where we are utilizing a rotation of remote work and physical locations. So anything that you want to send to administration, I would ask that you send to Patty, Danielle, and Bob, because that administration department, we've discovered in talking with health officials, is not suitable for social distancing. And so the administration department is also impacted by that order of minimum staffing to affect social distancing and remote versus physical. So just bear with us as we try to be mindful of our requirements to the greater community, while we're also trying to be mindful of safe practices for everybody.
I don't think any of us would plan this as a test to see how well our staff performs, but they're doing a great job. So we'll ask each of us and the public to understand what's happening. And I do want to comment too, when you talk about essential workers. I know I've gotten at least one email thanking us in one case and worried in the other that we would keep our permitting actions going on. I know we have been to some extent, certainly conservation and in health, and what they can do by remote participation so that folks can keep working in accordance with the governor's orders, of course, but in line with that, what we can keep doing. So great job. Joe, you look like you want to say something else?
No, I just want to say good night. To be honest, sir.
Anyone care to move that we adjourn?
Hey, what about selectmen's reports?
We don't want to hear that.
We don't want any of that. I don't have a report myself, Don.
Yeah, further what Joe was saying, does anybody know whether the state's suspended, a lot of these regulatory bodies 60 days and it becomes constructive acceptance of things. Has anybody looked into?
I know, Joe, I can speak to conservation. I'm not sure about Board of Health, but conservation has extended that deadline so we don't get into that automatic acceptance. I think they moved it to 90 days or longer.
I'm thinking of ZBA and planning board too.
And so I don't know, Joe, maybe you can help out.
Yeah, so we did receive guidance on Sunday. Sunday from KP Law on land use matters and changes or impacts to both open meeting and public records laws. I was able to share that with all the department heads. I was hoping to, but I'm not prepared tonight to talk about our drop box that people will see outside of Town Hall between the administration entrance and the Albro House. It may look like a trash compactor that we used at a beach last year, but it is now an officially functioning municipal government lockbox, drop box for all materials that people want to get to government to be processed. So we're expecting payments, obviously. We're expecting requests for documents. We're also expecting submittals of plans and things of that nature. So we are aware of some guidance on land use and how that's impacting. We're also aware of the latest closures of courts that have jurisdiction in those areas as well. So we're aware of all of it. We're just trying to react to it. And, that came on Sunday. We were all set to discuss it today until the governor came out with his order, and the president may do something tomorrow and that'll change our day. So we are aware of all of that. We're just trying to process it.
Just to clarify, Don, on conservation, it was specifically from DEP.
Okay.
So they did those separately.
And finally, I want to apologize to Scott Tinsley. I just wanted to say that I read his memo about looking better and gussying up for these things, but this is the best I could do.
Good job, Don. Thank you.
Okay. Ed?
Yeah, I just have a comment. We're very appreciative of the efforts our town staff are putting in for us. They're in my mind going well beyond the call of duty in putting up with what we all have to face. I happened to stop into one of our businesses today to get a cup of coffee, and was interested to note he was having an issue with the state over some of his employees that he's had to lay off on their filings for unemployment. On Saturday, he sent emails to both of our state reps, Sarah Peak and Julian Sear, and I was absolutely astonished to find that he got a response from both the offices, and actually both of our state elected officials within 20 minutes. So I think it goes to show how well we're being served by our state elected legislators, and how serious they're taking helping out in any way they can.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Steve?
I just reiterate what Ed said. I can't thank the staff at Town Hall and all of the employees of the town for all the yeoman's work they're doing. It's just a very difficult time, and we're thankful very much for what you've done.
Thank you, Steve. Michael?
Just echo the last two selectmen's comments. Thank you to everyone.
Yep, it's unanimous, Joe, and please relay that to everyone in the town staff force.
Gladly and willingly.
And to Joe, too.
Well, we all, I include him as part of town folks.
So do I.
Accept the motion, so does Joe. Motion to adjourn. Second. Is there a second? All in favor? I'll take a roll call, I guess. Don?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Good night, folks, and thanks for the meeting.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
This conference is no longer being recorded.